It's May 29th, 2026, and finally, some warm weather. This month's show leans into the Canadian economy with our quarterly check-in with BMO Chief Economist Douglas Porter. Douglas does a great job of cutting through the noise of often inflammatory headlines with clear, grounded insight. You'll want to stick around for that. We follow that up with some lighter conversation with our resident hockey and data expert, Sean McCormick, as we dig into the NHL playoff spending in Montreal. Montreal fans are arguably the most passionate in the league, but how does that translate into spending across the city? We'll stick around to find out. But first, I sit down with Michael Beckerman from the Canadian Premier League to talk about what it really takes to grow a professional soccer league in Canada and the parallels to running a small business. Michael brings some great perspective. You could say that I've wrapped this month's economic vegetables in a bit of sports dessert. It's a spoonful of sugar approach this month on Just Good Business. The Canadian Premier League is Canada's top-tier professional men's soccer league, launched in 2019. Its mission is to develop Canadian talent, build sustainable clubs, and grow the sport nationwide. Now, launching a new league in Canada's highly competitive sports landscape is no small feat. There's a lot to learn from that experience and lessons that apply broadly to Canadian businesses. So joining me today to share those insights is Michael Beckerman. He is a Chief Commercial Officer at Canada Soccer Media and Entertainment. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today on Just Good Business.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here, and I love the parallels between what the CPL is doing with small to medium-sized businesses, so looking forward to the conversation.
So the Canadian Premier League is still a relatively young organization. I mentioned off the top, it was launched in 2019, but founded in 2017. In those early years, you were faced with the daunting task of establishing credibility, sustainability, trust. So what business principles were most important in those early years?
I think I'd talk about an authentic connection to the fans right at the community level. And I think once you get that authentic connection to fans, it drives credibility to the soccer community. And then you start to drive credibility and interest to broader entertainment from that perspective. So I'd start off with the connection at the community levels. And the parallel I'd offer from a business side at my alma mater at Nike, like a pretty good company, start off with Phil Knight with a table and going to track meets and talking about shoes to track and field athletes.
Right.
And so we started the league with big ambitions in terms of being by Canadians for Canadians, but we really started off at the grassroots level to drive the authentic connection with our core audience.
So you're playing the long game here and you want sustainability. What does that look like in practice? Like, what are you doing to make that happen?
Well, I think I'll first off talk about why the CPL is different from other North American professional sports leagues. It is uniquely Canadian, built by Canadians for Canadians. And it is in the ecosystem of one of the largest participation sports in the world, being soccer.
Right.
And so our founders recognized that there was a void in the marketplace for a uniquely Canadian sports league grounded into the world's most popular sport, into Canada's number one participation sport. And it was through that window that the Canadian Premier League was established. And it was established with a notion of intention because we knew through FIFA that there was an opportunity that Canada was going to get awarded the ability to host FIFA 2026 World Cup if we had a domestic league in place.
Right.
And so it was very important stepping stone for the World Cup to have the CPL in place. And so there's a logical progression between when the CPL came into existence, weathered through COVID like a warrior. Now we've got the World Cup as a platform to further amplify the brand and grow the league.
As I mentioned off the top, Canada does have a very crowded sports and entertainment landscape, apart from the big four: hockey, baseball, basketball, football. We also have some pretty successful MLS clubs in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. You mentioned that your focus is domestic and your clubs are eligible for CONCACAF. So is that how you're going to differentiate yourself from those other clubs?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up CONCACAF because that's really at the top of the pyramid in terms of high performance football.
Right.
And so what a great opportunity for our CPL players to be able to perform on one of the world's largest stage by earning the right to be there.
Right.
I wouldn't suggest it's a crowded sports and entertainment landscape. There is a sense of Darwinism that happens. And if you have the right product, fans and supporters are going to come and connect with you. And so I look at the geography of what the Canadian Premier League represents. Like we're in Halifax, we've got 2 teams in British Columbia, really important teams in markets like Ottawa and Calgary and Toronto and Hamilton, and an expansion team that we're so excited about with the Supra in Montreal. So like you just rattle off those cities, and it's a uniquely domestic league that's proudly Canadian.
Right.
And so we can differentiate ourselves as being by Canadians for Canadians. And the quality of football, the quality of soccer is amongst the best in the world. And it's a pretty affordable ticket compared to some of the other examples as well. So we get a lot of families out, which is amazing. We get a lot of young soccer fans, which is amazing. And we get people that just want to connect and root for the home team that have learned to fall in love with soccer.
You mentioned earlier about the Grassroots, and you position yourself as more than a league, your community and cultural platform. A lot of small business owners would relate to having to grow their client base. How did you guys build that loyalty and relevance?
I'm a brand person at heart, and I like to think of a good brand can transcend borders and cultures and languages, but needs to be locally rooted to be truly authentic. And it's an interesting way to think about it. Like you think about the global brands are successful when they're culturally relevant. And there was such intention in terms of how we went about and rolled out the clubs across the Canadian Premier League. Their first meetings were with the local soccer associations, like showing up at U12 practices and talking about the vision of what the team is and trying to get input from the soccer supporters and showing up at their summer camps and sponsoring the summer soccer camps. Like, it was truly grassroots in every sense of the word. Through that grassroots and being truly authentic to who the end audience is from what the Canadian Premier League is going to give you an unwavering sense of vision and commitment in terms of what your brand stands for. And so for your audience to unpack some of those marketing buzzwords, like what are we talking about? To develop that emotional connection for a brand, you need to be truly authentic, right? And to build something transformational, you need to have a clear, unyielding sense of vision in terms of what your brand stands for. And certainly with the CPL, we're always going to be a work in progress as humble Canadians, yet we should be immensely proud of what has been accomplished in pretty short order. And we're heading into the World Cup,
right?
Like the world's largest event. And we're hosting the world's largest event here in Canada. And we know there's 16 million soccer enthusiasts in Canada. We know there's more than 1 million soccer participants in Canada. You can just imagine what's going to happen to those numbers over the next couple of years.
Have you sensed that the growing sense of national pride in Canada has helped you guys grow even faster?
There's certainly a sense of pride in this being a Canadian league made for Canadians and built by Canadians. And so there's that part of the maple leaf and the red and white. And I think there's also something inherently beautiful about the beautiful game, right? Like people talk about the beautiful game being soccer. And so what does that mean from a Canadian perspective? There's a reason why we don't talk about our country as a cultural melting pot. We talk about ourselves as a cultural mosaic. And that really means to me bringing the best of our amazing cultures from coast to coast to coast together under one unifying vision of what it means to be Canadian. And there is no better physical manifestation of the Canadian mosaic than watching soccer.
I just said yesterday, actually, there's no better place than, in my case, being in and around the city of Toronto during a tournament like the World Cup or Euro Cup, because everyone's out wearing their jerseys, whether it's the Portugal jersey or Brazilian jersey or Italian jersey. But it's got to help, though, that in this tournament, Team Canada is in there this time, right? And I'm looking forward to being able to wear a Canadian, I call it jersey because of my hockey thing, I guess a Canadian kit to cheer on Team Canada during this tournament.
You can call it kit or jersey. We don't care as long as you're wearing it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this is the first time, obviously on our home soil.
Right.
And we've got a very competitive men's national team that will hopefully do very well and advance beyond their pool. We've got the Women's World Cup happening next year in Brazil. We've got the 2028 Olympics. Then 2029, we've got World Cup qualifying again. Then we've got men's qualifying in 2030. So there's no better time to be a fan of Canada because we do get to cheer for our favorite team at this championships. And it's not going to be Portugal or definitely not Italy.
No, right.
In advance.
Yeah.
But now we have the opportunity of wearing the Canadian red, in some cases the Canadian black and red, and cheer for our favorite team. So we're not cheering for our second favorite team coming out of the gate.
Exactly. Now, back a little to the business side again. As the league has grown, how do you ensure alignment across multiple clubs and ownership groups? And how do you approach partnerships? How's that evolved from the early days to now?
That's a great question. And I think I'd go back. If I had to say one word, it would be values. Like you've been around a little bit, Al. I've been around for a long time. And any business partnership, any relationship, if you're not working with the same shared set of values, things aren't going to work out, right? And so we had some real visionaries that pulled together the Canadian Premier League. And what was important was they had a passion for Canada. They had a passion for sport. They knew how to build a business, and they had a common shared set of values. That doesn't mean everybody's coming with the same point of view. It means that you're coming from a place of empathy, integrity, a place of growth, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where we started from a same shared set of values. And that happens from the ownership side, from the coach's side, from the player side. It also happens off the pitch as well. Like what sponsors are going to join us in helping to amplify that vision? Like WestJet came on board. Like what an amazing airline that reflects the values of Canada. Volkswagen came on board, which was just like a great sponsor with a connection at the dealership level, coast to coast to coast. And if I may, Moneris came on board last year. And so we're very, very proud on the kit to have the Moneris logo right on the sleeve. And then Moneris has become an authentic part of the Canadian soccer landscape. So it's great to see Moneris connecting with the Canadian soccer audience. And I think it reflects so well on the Moneris brand because not only are they big national brand, but also locally rooted at the community level. So it's a really nice fit for the Moneris sponsorship as well.
I was really excited when I heard about that partnership as well and got to talk to you now about it. So thank you very much for doing that. One last question. If you were to leave our listeners or entrepreneurs, small business owners with one final piece of advice, they're trying to build something that's both profitable and purposeful, and you've done it with CPL. What would that advice be?
Clarity of vision. Listen to your audience. Listen to your consumer. We don't get everything right, but we listen. We have focus groups with fans, offline, online, just in terms of helping us build an exciting product for everyone. I think thinking about the ecosystem is really important. So from a CPL perspective, it was really important that we had amazing broadcast partners. And so whether it's One Soccer or TSN or CBC or TVR, making sure that we had the right ecosystem, driving the authenticity through a community level, uniquely important. And so it is in the same way that we think about sports as terms of top of the pyramid from high performance to the lower part of the pyramid, which is grassroots. That's the way you need to think about business, right?
Yeah.
At the very, very top of the house, you've got your unyielding in terms of your North Star, what it is that you want to stand for. And then you've got your pillars around product and pricing and marketing and distribution, whatever your business is, that needs to all be laddered up to that one vision.
Amazing. Actually, I said last question, but this is the last question because you'd mentioned the World Cup, and yes, we're hosting some of the tournament up here in Canada. What does it mean to your athletes that this is happening on Canadian soil?
One of the amazing parts of the Canadian Premier League is being able to feed in some of Canada's greatest soccer players into the national team program. And so what the Canadian Premier League provides our Canadian soccer athletes is another avenue to hone their skills, be professional soccer players, and continue to develop and grow as human beings, as well as soccer players as well. And so a lot of the CPL players have gone to the Canadian national team training camps. A handful of them have gotten really important minutes supporting the national team. And this is just another opportunity for the CPL to connect with the very best in the world.
That's all very valuable experience that'll hopefully pay dividends for the future of Canadian soccer. Michael, thank you so much for all the time you gave me today. If folks want to learn more about the CPL, where would you send them?
Oh, man. Well, I hope you're following us on socials. Like if you're not following out socials, like holy FOMO. Like the league is a ton of fun, right? Like in the league final in Ottawa last year, we had something that got coined the icicle kick. And it was,
oh, yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Somewhat familiar with the bicycle kick. And it was a beautiful Ottawa freezing night. Like that ended up getting over 1 billion views around the world, right? A couple of weeks ago, one of our players scored a goal and he grabbed from his shin guards his business card because he has a side hustle as a real estate agent and put it up to the camera. And so you think like this is a league that captures these amazing cultural moments that punches above our weight in terms of global profile. Like we're getting billions of views for these remarkable cultural zeitgeist moments. So for goodness sakes, follow us on our social handles at CPL Soccer. And then if you want a little bit more information, go to cplsoccer.com. The best thing you can do is come out to a match.
Sure.
We'd love to have you and see you and cheer loudly and have a lot of fun.
I'll post links to all of that in the show notes. So you can count me as at least a couple of dozen views on that icicle kick. I remember when it first happened. I think I watched it on repeat a few hundred times. Michael, again, thank you so much for your time today, and go Canada in World Cup this summer.
Well done. Go Canada.
Ask most Canadians how the economy feels right now, and you'll hear a similar story. Everything's expensive, growth feels slow, there's a lot of uncertainty about what's coming next. And for business owners, that uncertainty hits even harder. You're making real decisions every day without a clear read on where things are headed. So today we're going to try to cut through the noise with a familiar voice, BMO's chief economist and friend of the show, Douglas Porter, back for his regular visit. Douglas, welcome back to Just Good Business. How have you been?
I've been well, thanks, Al. I'm not sure the economy's been as well as I have, but no, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me again.
Well, let's talk about that. Obviously, that's why we're here. We keep hearing the U.S. economy is looking stronger than Canada's. On the ground, what does that actually mean for Canadian businesses trying to grow or compete right now?
Yeah, and if we step back and really get at, well, why is the U.S. economy looking stronger than Canada? I think there's two reasons. One is a positive for the U.S. and one is a slight negative for Canada. The positive for the U.S. is, whatever you think about AI, the reality on the ground is a lot of money is being spent on the build-out or the backbone of AI. I mean, it is hard to exaggerate the kind of dollars that we're talking about that's being invested in the U.S. economy right now, mostly in data centers, chips, and everything related to AI. Now, admittingly, a lot of that money is flowing abroad to places like Taiwan that build the chips, but a lot is staying in the U.S. as well. And despite all the policy uncertainty we've been dealing with over the last year, that AI build-out is really supporting U.S. growth and activity. Not such a big deal in Canada. I mean, there are some data centers being built here in Canada. We obviously don't have the chip industry the U.S. does. So we're really not seeing much of a flow through to our economy from the major investments in AI. Meanwhile, the relative negative that we're dealing with is the uncertainty that still lingers on the trade front. That has not gone away.
Right.
We've got this soft deadline of July 1st in terms of the USMCA. I think we're going to go right through that deadline. I suspect we're still going to be dealing with trade uncertainty through the remainder of this year. That's our view. What does it mean for businesses on the ground? Well, it just means the Canadian economy, it's not in a recession. Some people have called it a zombie USMCA. Well, in some ways, it's almost a zombie economy as a result of that we're barely growing.
Right.
But we are growing. But very slowly, just because of the trade uncertainty, and we're not getting the benefits from AI. So it's a tough grind, is the way I would describe it.
Now, bringing things back up to Canada a bit, our Q1 consumer spend report showed spending was flat or down once you adjusted for inflation in the first quarter of this year. Should business owners expect that pullback to continue further, or has the slowdown been overstated?
I would say in general, consumers are cautious. Employment is about flat over the past year, so there's not a lot of growth on that front. Wages are still relatively steady and holding pretty close to inflation, if not even a little bit above it still. But there are two big things to be a little bit cautious in terms of the consumer. First of all, one reality that all businesses are going to have to deal with, and we are dealing with, is we've had this tremendous slowdown in population growth, as Ottawa has, basically put a lid on immigration for a couple of years to help stabilize the housing market and improve the job market as well for young people. And so we're going to go through a couple of years where you're just not getting the population growth that I think a lot of businesses are used to. And that, that means you're not getting the big, population-led increases in consumer spending. But then on a per person basis, the other of course, big change since we last spoke is we've had this conflict in Iran,
Right.
which has led to a big step up in oil prices, gas prices, and that's put another chill and another area of uncertainty into the consumer. I don't think it's enough to skewer the consumer and send them over the edge and tip them over the edge, but it's going to keep them really, really cautious. And so I think, kind of what we saw in the first quarter is probably what we'll get through the rest of this year is a consumer that's still out there, but, still generally quite cautious and without a whole lot of growth.
Your point on population growth, last month, I interviewed somebody from Opportunities in New Brunswick, and she was mentioning how they've seen it too. Like through the pandemic, they saw tremendous growth. A lot of people moving from population centers out into New Brunswick, but also them attracting new Canadians. And she says that that's really hurt their growth in the last year or so.
Yeah. And it's a very sudden change. We went from some of the strongest population growth that we'd seen in the century to now, for the first time since Confederation, Canada's population actually declined a little bit last year. And we're likely to see something pretty close to zero this year and in 27 as well.
Now, a lot of our listeners, obviously, they're not economists. They're running their businesses. If they're hearing rates may come down eventually, what would you suggest they actually be doing right now? Waiting or borrowing or staying cautious?
Well, I hate to tell people to stay cautious, but I actually do think that, there are plenty of reasons to be a bit on the cautious side right now without, completely pulling back in a significant way. But my concern is that long-term interest rates have actually marched up a lot globally. This is not just a Canadian story, but it's certainly happening in Canada as well. We're seeing those long-term bond yields rising because, first of all, there's less chance of lower interest rates from the Bank of Canada, and there's also concern about inflation more generally as a result of the run-up in oil prices. My view is eventually these longer-term rates will crest and start to come down, especially if we do get some kind of an agreement between the U.S. and Iran. You're likely to see oil prices in that situation pull back, maybe not to pre-war levels, but they will retreat somewhat. And then we can maybe start talking about lower interest rates. But until then, I think, unfortunately, the risk is the other way. And in fact, the financial markets are actually thinking that the next move by the Bank of Canada might be a rate hike, not a rate cut. Now, I don't see a rate hike. Our official call is no change by the Bank of Canada through the rest of this year. But that's the way the financial markets are leaning. That's the way they see the risk tilted, that the Bank of Canada might actually feel they have to raise interest rates because of the rise in inflation driven by the higher oil prices that we've seen already.
Well, let's hope not. I mean, it feels like they stabilized it over the last quarter or so. So it'd be nice to at least maintain, if not eventually start seeing it lowered, right?
Yeah, and I think personally, if I was running the Bank of Canada, if I was giving them advice, I would say just do nothing at this point and wait until we see what happens with this conflict with Iran.
So let's talk real estate real quick here. Even for businesses outside of real estate, housing drives so much of the Canadian economy. What ripple effects should business owners be paying close attention to over the next year?
Well, one thing we've seen is just a very slow environment for home sales, pretty much ever since interest rates started going up more than 4 years ago. Coming out of the pandemic, we had one of the hottest housing markets we've ever seen for a couple of years during the pandemic. And then it's like somebody turned the lights out when interest rates started going up in 22, and they've never really been turned fully back on again.
Yeah.
Sales have sort of been quiet for the last 4+ years. Frankly, we don't see that changing. And, that spills into all kinds of other businesses, things like furniture sales, appliance sales, everything related to home buying and renovations. It looks as if the housing market will still be pretty quiet over the next year. And, as I mentioned earlier, how we don't see interest rates going down. In fact, there's even a small risk they go up, which would further chill the housing market. The one thing I would add, though, is home building activity is still relatively healthy. Now, a lot of that is due to multiple units and rentals that are being built. But, the trades activity is still relatively solid. We're still going to build about 230 or 240,000 homes this year, which is better than where we were 10 years ago, for instance.
Interesting. Now, the federal government's spring economic update, they talked about programs focused on infrastructure, skilled trades, and safer communities. From your perspective, are these the kinds of investments that will meaningfully strengthen the economy? And are we moving in the right direction?
I would say in general, yes. The one big picture to always keep in mind here is, this is coming against the backdrop of all this trade uncertainty with the U.S. that hasn't gone away. And in many respects, Prime Minister Carney and his team have basically just had to be in a reaction mode to that uncertainty, which is weighing on the manufacturing sector in particular. And they're basically looking for ways to offset that drag. Some of it is infrastructure spending, some is defense spending, some is, trying to knock down interprovincial trade barriers here in Canada, some is trying to find new trading arrangements outside of North America, some is trying to encourage development of our own resource sector projects. All those things are helping, but like I said at the outset, we're still looking at really modest growth because ultimately our trade with the U.S. is a very, very important element of our economy. And if that's got a cloud over it, it's really tough for the economy to perform very well. I think, Ottawa is doing what they can. It's not a light switch they can just flip to suddenly turn on all these big major projects or infrastructure projects. It takes time.
Sure.
I'm actually fairly optimistic on 2027 because I think a lot of these things will start to gel by late this year or even in the next year, whether it's defense spending or infrastructure spending or major projects. I do think that's actually going to set us up for a better year next year.
And a lot of these projects are kind of long-term projects, right? That you're not going to see dividends for a while. The best time was probably to start them 10, 15 years ago, but the next best time is now, right?
Yeah, it's the old, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and next best time is now.
Yeah, exactly.
And in many respects, I would think of it that way. And I'll just give you one example quickly is, everyone's looking at another potential pipeline. It took more than a decade from the time that last one was approved to the time the oil started to flow.
Right.
I think we have to realize these projects take a long time to work their way through all the approval planning and actually building before they get done.
A quick comment on job numbers. How is it looking right now? I mean, are these projects that are being planned, are they affecting the job numbers right now?
So it's interesting. The resource sector, where a lot of, the major projects areas is aimed, is actually a pretty small employer. Okay. Overall. Those are really well-paying jobs. They're spread across much of the country, but it's a relatively small share of the economy. Actually, that area of employment is doing well. But when you look at overall employment, it has barely grown in the last year. And the unemployment rate at 6.9%, I would say, is a bit on the soft side of things. Encouragingly, the unemployment rate has not gotten any worse over the last year. It was exactly 6.9% a year ago. So despite all the trade uncertainty I've been talking about, the unemployment rate has actually managed to hold steady. But some of that is just the fact that, the population has stopped growing. A lot of people are retiring, or the peak of the baby boom. The peak number of births was in 1959, 1960, and 61. All those people are now retirement age and starting to age out of the workforce. So the number of workers is actually starting to come down a bit in Canada, which is helping keep the unemployment rate from rising. But overall, I'd say it's a pretty tough job market out there. And the good way to look at it is the youth unemployment rate is over 14%. It's really challenging to get your foot in the job market right now.
Yeah, I've got a son who's in between the years at university looking for work, and he's having a hard time finding full-time work. He's got a part-time job right now, but he's having a hard time finding something full-time.
That's a very common story, by the way.
Douglas, thank you so much. You're very generous with your time and coming on every quarter. If anyone wants to keep up with your insights and your outlook, where's the best place to follow your work?
You can just Google BMO Economics. Most of what we produce is on our website. And you don't need a password to read the economics research. I will say there's some material that is internal only that doesn't make it to the website, but the vast majority of what we produce is there at BMO Economics.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Al. Nice to talk to you.
It's that time of year again. Time to talk NHL playoff spending in Canada. Now, you may recall that last year, 5 Canadian teams made the playoffs, with Edmonton going all the way to the final and driving significant boosts in spending across those markets. This year, the picture looks a little different. Only 3 Canadian teams, Montreal, Edmonton, and Ottawa, qualified. And as we move deeper into round 3, those 3 have been narrowed down to just 1, Montreal. Now, round 2, Montreal battled through a thrilling 7-game series against Buffalo, capped off by an overtime winner by Alex Newhook to send the Canadiens through. So what impact did that 7-game series have to consumer spending in Montreal? To break down the results, I'm joined by our resident data and hockey expert, Sean McCormick. Sean, first of all, welcome back to Just Good Business. And secondly, what happened to your Oilers this year?
You can't get there every year, brother.
At least past the first round, no?
Yeah. It was. It's been a fun ride. Mm-hmm. We're hoping it's a blip on the radar, as they say, a bump in the road. But boy, oh boy, the Habs are an exciting hockey team, and they're keeping the Canadian hockey fans who are team agnostic to a certain extent. They're keeping them interested, but there's no question, there's no team agnostic aspect in Montreal, that's for sure, while they're gripping that city, as you'd expect.
Yeah. Now, last year, we saw meaningful lifts in spend across the Canadian hockey markets, but The impact was more muted in larger cities like Toronto, where there's, more competition for the entertainment dollar, for example. And Montreal falls into that category. But what did our data show for that second round?
Yeah, I mean, when the Habs were playing at home, the fans came out of their homes and they congregated in the bars and the restaurants to an extent that, we really haven't seen. We didn't see this in Edmonton the last couple of years. We didn't see it in Ottawa in the first round. We didn't see it in, Vancouver a couple of years ago and the Leafs last year.
Yeah.
The numbers just jump off the page for the home games in particular. Game number 3, citywide dollar volume increase in bars and restaurants of 96%. So like a double, basically. And I say this all the time, like moving the needle citywide by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4% is significant. 96%.
Sure.
You have to have a force that binds.
Right.
And my oh my.
Now that was a Sunday. And I mean, so you can maybe account for that being a Sunday, but the increases look great even throughout the week.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, citywide was a double. In and around the arena was plus 40% in game 3. So that was the biggest lift, citywide. And we still had a 40% almost near the arena. So it wasn't just because you've got thousands of fans watching outside of the arena.
Right.
This is just people coming down and getting into the bars or getting out of their condos downtown and getting into the bars and really making a night of it. Very different story on the road, where, we're seeing basically, call it flat for the road games, with the exception of game 5, where, citywide was up 10%. But I've got a theory on this one, and my sample size is 1, and that's me. I'm a hardcore sports fan.
Sure.
I'm way hardcore than the average Joe. And when my team is playing, I actually don't want to go to the bar to watch it. I want to watch it at home in the comfort of my home, where I can see replays, and maybe I'll get 2 feeds of the game going at the same time on, a couple different screens, and I want to focus. And that seems to be what Habs fans were doing for the road games. They're like, why would I go out to a bar where I'm going to have all these distractions when I can watch the game at home and focus? Because there's no way that Habs fans decided they were going to be fans of the team when the team's playing at home, and they're just going to, watch baseball games, on game nights otherwise. And we saw it. We say it was really black and white, the difference between the home games and the road games.
By the time this interview goes out, we'll probably be halfway through round 3. I mean, how do the Habs look? Like, what do you think their chances are?
Well, I always get back to the biggest, toughest, meanest team wins the Stanley Cup every year. Whether that was the Florida Panthers the last 2 years, Tampa Bay Lightning, in the past, Washington when they won, Boston, you go back for the last 10 or 15 years, regardless of the focus on speed and skill in the regular season, it's the biggest, toughest, meanest team. You have to be good too, but it's the biggest, toughest, meanest team amongst the talented teams that wins. I mean, are the Habs the biggest, toughest, meanest team? No, they're not. They've got some exciting young players, sure, on stature, mainly. So we'll see where this goes. The team, Vegas and Colorado in the West, both of those teams are big teams. Both of those teams are tough teams, in particular Colorado. But it's fun to watch the Habs, and I don't want to let anybody down by saying I don't think the Habs are going to win. I'm just saying the biggest, toughest, meanest team usually wins the Stanley Cup.
Well, and you mentioned it is a young team, so win or not, this is definitely valuable experience for this team to go through these playoffs this year.
Yeah, no question. And they haven't come out of nowhere, right? Like, they were a really good team in the regular season. I don't have the numbers at hand, but I'm pretty sure they were top 5 in the NHL in terms of like goals scored and number of offensive categories. And Dobish is looking good between the pipes. He's on a roll right now.
Looks great, yeah.
I don't know if he's the second coming of, Patrick Waugh by any stretch, but you get a goalie that gets hot, you play some good team defense and score some timely goals. That's what it takes to go deep into the playoffs. And third round is pretty deep in the playoffs.
Yes.
4 teams left. That's an accomplishment getting to the third round. Each round is a little bit different. Right. In every year, you get 4 rounds. The first round is just like, It is no holds barred like hockey. It's arguably the most exciting round.
Well, thank you so much, Sean, for joining me today. Where can folks learn more about Moneris Data Services and what your team does?
Dataservices.moneris.com. Lots of content on there. And if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, my contact info is right there.
Thanks a lot, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
And that's our show for this month. As always, please check the show notes for links to everything we talked about in this episode. If you have any questions about anything business related, you can email us at podcast@moneris.com and we'll try to answer them in future episodes. Also, you can check out videos to all our interviews in the Moneris YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to see them as they're released. On behalf of Michael, Douglas, Sean, myself, and the rest of Moneris, it's just good business saying thank you for listening. See you in June.